The headlights cut through the falling snow like a blade through darkness. William Harrison stopped his car before the strangest sight he'd ever encountered. A woman in a white wedding dress walking along the roadside, high heels dangling from her fingers, her hair damp and disheveled. The expensive gown was torn at the hem, dragging across the asphalt. Normally, Will would have driven past without stopping. He'd learned to avoid interfering in other people's lives, but something about the way she walked, as if she were trying to escape from herself, made him pause. He rolled down his window. "Do you need help? Hit that like button if you've ever made a split-second decision that changed everything." Will had been driving home from Charlie's parent-teacher conference, his mind still processing Mrs. Peterson's gentle concerns about his 8-year-old daughter's withdrawn behavior. The roads through Greenwich were familiar, winding past colonial estates and bare oak trees that would bloom magnificently in spring. He'd taken this route countless times since moving to Connecticut, but tonight felt different. The snow was heavier than the weather report had predicted, and the woman in the wedding dress seemed to materialize from the storm itself. She looked up at him with eyes that held a mixture of defiance and desperation. Even in the dim glow of his headlights, he could see she was beautiful in that polished way that spoke of expensive salons and careful breeding. But there was something raw beneath the surface, something that reminded him of looking in the mirror after Sarah's funeral. "I'm fine," she said, her voice carrying the refined accent of someone who'd attended private schools and country clubs. "Just taking a walk." Will shifted his car into park. In a wedding dress, in a snowstorm on Route 9. A small smile flickered across her face before disappearing. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic." He studied her for a moment, noting the way she held herself with careful composure despite the obvious distress. "Look, I don't know what happened tonight, but you're going to freeze to death out here. No judgment, no questions, just a warm car and a destination of your choice." She hesitated, glancing back down the road as if expecting someone to follow. Her wedding dress, which probably costs more than his car, was soaked through at the bottom. The delicate beadwork caught the light like captured stars. "I don't actually have a destination," she admitted quietly. Will reached across and opened the passenger door. "Sometimes that's the best kind of journey." Victoria Ashford, though she wouldn't tell him her name for another hour, slid into the passenger seat with the careful grace of someone accustomed to being watched. She pulled the seat belt across the voluminous skirt, creating an almost comical contrast between the mundane safety measure and the fairy tale gown. "I'm Will," he said, pulling back onto the road. "Tori," she replied after a pause. "And thank you." They drove in silence for several miles, the only sound the soft whisper of snow against the windshield and the gentle hum of the heater. Will found himself stealing glances at her profile, trying to piece together the story. A wedding dress this elaborate didn't come from impulse shopping. The way she carried herself suggested old money, real wealth. But there was something fragile about her composure, like ice that might crack under pressure. "Are you cold?" he asked, noticing her slight shiver. Little." He reached into the back seat and pulled out a worn wool blanket, one of Charlie's many comfort items that had migrated to his car over the years. "Here. It's not much, but it's warm." Tori accepted the blanket with a grateful nod, wrapping it around her shoulders. The contrast was striking. Expensive silk and lace covered by a child security blanket with faded cartoon characters. She noticed his glance and smiled fully. "I suppose I look ridiculous." "You look like someone who's having the worst night of her life," Will said honestly. "And that's okay. We all have those nights." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "You sound like you speak from experience, don't we all?" They'd reached the outskirts of town, where the grand estates gave way to more modest homes. Will realized he'd been driving aimlessly, reluctant to end this strange encounter. His house was just a few miles away, a colonial revival that Sarah had fallen in love with during their house hunting expedition 8 years ago. It was too big for just him and Charlie now, but he couldn't bring himself to sell it. "Where would you like me to take you?" he asked. Tori was quiet for a long moment. "I don't have anywhere to go," she said finally. "My apartment. My old apartment. I gave it up when I moved in with." She gestured vaguely at her dress. "And I can't go to my parents. They're the reason I'm wearing this thing in the first place." Will made a decision that surprised him. "I have a guest room. It's not much, but it's warm and private." You can figure out your next move in the morning. You don't know me, she protested. I could be anyone. You could be, he agreed. But you're not. You're someone who's lost right now, and I remember what that feels like. As they pulled into his driveway, Will felt a flutter of nervousness. He hadn't brought a woman home since Sarah died. The house still felt like a shrine to his late wife, filled with her choices and memories. But something about Tori's situation bypassed his usual defenses. The house was dark except for the porch light he'd left on for Charlie, who was spending the night at her best friend's house. Will was grateful for the timing. This situation was complicated enough without trying to explain a stranger in a wedding dress to his 8-year-old daughter. And the two got married and together. "Welcome to our humble home," he said. Unlocking the front door, Tori stepped inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. The interior was warm and lived in, with family photos scattered on side tables and Charlie's artwork decorating the refrigerator. It was the kind of home that felt like a hug, the opposite of the sterile perfection she'd been living in for the past year. "You have a beautiful home," she said, meaning it. "My wife chose most of it," Will replied, then caught himself. "My late wife. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. Coffee. I was going to make some anyway." While Will busied himself in the kitchen, Tori wandered around the living room studying the family photos. She could see the progression of years. A young couple's wedding photo, pregnancy announcements, a tiny baby growing into a bright oak little girl. There was love in every frame. The kind of deep genuine affection that couldn't be manufactured or bought. "How long?" she asked when he returned with 2 steaming mugs. 2 years, Will said, settling into his usual chair. "Cancer." It was quick, which was both a blessing and a curse. Tori curled up on the couch, tucking the wedding dress around her legs. What was her name? Zara. She was a nurse at the children's hospital. She used to say that healing people was just another form of love. She sounds wonderful. She was. Will took a sip of his coffee, studying Tori's face. "What about you? What's your story?" For a moment, he thought she might deflect or refuse to answer, but something in the warm atmosphere of the house, the gentle acceptance in his voice, seemed to break through her defenses. "I was supposed to marry a man named Theodore Blackstone tonight," she said quietly. "Theo, he's brilliant, successful, incredibly wealthy. My parents were thrilled. I was supposed to be thrilled, but you weren't. I was supposed to be a lot of things." She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, seeking warmth. The perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect accessory to his perfect life. But standing there in that church, surrounded by 500 people I barely knew, I realized I was about to disappear completely. Will nodded slowly. "So you ran." "I ran right out of the church through the reception hall past the photographers and the wedding planner and my mother's horrified expression. I just ran until I couldn't run anymore. And now I'm sitting in a stranger's living room in a ruined wedding dress, drinking coffee, and wondering what the hell I'm going to do with my life." "That's not the worst place to start over," Will said gently. They talked until nearly 3 o'clock in the morning, sharing stories and silences in equal measure. Will found himself opening up about things he'd never discussed with anyone. His fears about raising Charlie alone, his guilt about moving on from Sarah's memory, his worry that he was failing as a father. Tori spoke about the suffocating expectations of her upbringing, the way she'd lost herself in trying to be what everyone else wanted her to be. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Will showed her to the guest room, providing her with some of Sarah's old clothes and toiletries. As he turned to leave, Tori spoke softly. "Thank you, Will, for stopping, for not asking too many questions, for just being kind. Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's a new day." The next morning, Will woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. For a moment, he was disoriented. He'd grown accustomed to the silence of the house. Then, he remembered Tori and felt a flutter of something he couldn't quite name. He found her at the stove wearing one of Sarah's old sweaters and a pair of jeans, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger this way, more approachable. Charlie was sitting at the kitchen table, studying their unexpected guest with the unblinking intensity that only 8-year-olds could manage. "Dad," Charlie exclaimed when she saw him. "Emma's friend brought me home early because she felt sick and there's a lady making pancakes." Will caught Tori's amused smile. "This is Tori," he said. "She's staying with us for a little while." "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Charlie asked with the brutal directness of childhood. Charlie, Will warned gently. It's okay, Tori said, crouching down to Charlie's eye level. I'm just a friend who needed help. Your dad was very kind to me. He's good at helping people, Charlie said matter-of-factly. He helped me when Mom died. Will felt his throat tighten. It was the first time Charlie had mentioned Sarah spontaneously in months. Your mom must have been very special, Tori said softly. She was the best mom in the world, Charlie replied. She used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings just like these. But Dad can't make them right. His are always too thick. Maybe we can teach him the secret, Tori suggested with a wink. Over breakfast, Will watched something shift in the dynamic of his small family. Charlie, who had been withdrawn and quiet since Sarah's death, seemed to come alive in Tori's presence. She asked questions about school, admired Charlie's latest drawings, and listened with genuine interest to 8-year-old concerns about friendship and homework. I have to go to work, Will said reluctantly. He'd taken a leave of absence from his finance job after Sarah's death and had been doing freelance consulting from home, but he had a client meeting that couldn't be postponed. I'll be fine, Tori assured him. I should probably start figuring out my next steps anyway. Can Tori stay until you get back? Charlie asked. She promised to help me with my art project. Will looked at Tori, who nodded. If that's okay with you, of course. Make yourself at home. When Will returned that afternoon, he found Tori and Charlie in the backyard, bundled up in winter coats and working on something near the old garden shed. They were laughing about something, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. It was a sound he hadn't heard in his house for too long. What are you two up to? He asked, approaching them. We're planting a garden, Charlie announced excitedly. Tori knows all about flowers and stuff. She says we can plant roses where Mom's old garden used to be. Will felt a pang of something complex. Gratitude mixed with grief. Sarah's garden had been her pride and joy, but it had gone to seed after her death. He'd been unable to maintain it, and eventually he'd let it grow wild rather than face the painful memories. That's a big project, he said carefully. All the best things are, Tori replied, meeting his eyes. But we don't have to decide anything today. We're just dreaming right now. That evening, after Charlie had gone to bed, Will and Tori sat on the back porch despite the cold, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the snow fall. The backyard looked peaceful under its white blanket. The overgrown garden now just gentle mounds beneath the snow. Thank you, Will said, for today. Charlie hasn't been this animated in months. She's a wonderful kid. She misses her mom terribly, but she's resilient. I worry I'm not enough for her. Sarah was the one who knew how to handle everything. The emotional stuff, the girl stuff. I'm just winging it most of the time. You're doing better than you think, Tori said gently. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up even when you're scared. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of unspoken understanding between them. Will found himself studying Tori's profile, wondering about the woman beneath the polished exterior. She'd shed the brittle perfection of the night before, revealing someone more complex and real. What will you do now? He asked eventually. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent so long being what other people wanted me to be that I'm not sure who I actually am. I have a marketing background, but I've been out of the workforce for the past year, playing the role of the perfect fiancé. You could stay, Will said quietly, surprising himself, for a while. I mean, until you figure things out. Tori turned to look at him, searching his face. That's incredibly generous, but I couldn't impose. You're not imposing. If anything, you're helping. Charlie's been different today, more like herself, and he paused, struggling with the words. I haven't felt this much like myself in a long time either. Will, I'm not asking for anything complicated, he said quickly. I'm just saying you're welcome here for as long as you need. 3 days later, their tentative peace was shattered by the arrival of Theodore Blackstone. Will was in his home office when he heard the cars in the driveway, expensive engines purring with quiet power. He looked out the window to see 2 black SUVs in a silver Bentley parked in front of his house. Theo Blackstone was exactly what Will had expected. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He was flanked by what appeared to be private security, though they had the courtesy to wait by the cars. Mr. Harrison, Theo said when Will opened the door. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't think people belong to other people, Will replied evenly. Victoria is having some kind of breakdown, Theo continued as if Will hadn't spoken. She's not thinking clearly. Her parents are worried sick. Maybe they should have thought about that before they pressured her into a marriage she didn't want. Theo's smile was sharp. You don't understand the situation. Victoria has responsibilities, obligations. She can't just run away from her life because she's having cold feet. It's not cold feet when someone realizes they're about to make the biggest mistake of their life. And you're qualified to make that assessment. Theo's voice carried the edge of someone used to getting his way. You're a nobody. A widower with a kid living in a house that's probably mortgaged to the hilt. What could you possibly offer someone like Victoria? Will felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. I'm not offering her anything except the right to make her own choices. Victoria. Theo called past Will into the house. Victoria, come out here. We need to talk. Tori appeared in the hallway with Charlie beside her. She looked pale but determined, her chin raised in defiance. Hello, Theo, she said calmly. Victoria, thank God you've had everyone worried sick. What's this nonsense about running away? We can fix this. Whatever's wrong. Nothing's wrong, Tori said, stepping forward. That's the problem. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be and it was suffocating me. You're being dramatic. You're 32 years old, not some teenager having a rebellion. We have a life together. Plans. You have plans. You've always had plans. I was just expected to go along with them. Theo's expression hardened. I gave you everything. A beautiful home, financial security, a place in society. What more could you want? I want a matter, Tori said quietly. I want to be more than just an accessory to your success. This is ridiculous, Theo snapped. You're coming home with me right now, and we're going to sort this out like adults. No, Tori said firmly. I'm not, Victoria, she said. No, Will interrupted, moving to stand beside Tori. I think you should leave. Theo's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. I see what's happening here. You think you can play house with my fiancée and her money. But Victoria doesn't have any money of her own. Her trust fund is contingent on marriage and her parents' approval. Without me, she's nothing. Then it's a good thing I'm not with you for your money, Tori said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You'll be back, Theo said coldly. When reality sets in, when you realize what you've given up, you'll come crawling back. And I might not be so forgiving next time. After Theo left, the house felt strangely quiet. Charlie had retreated to her room, unsettled by the confrontation. Tori stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself, looking fragile and lost. Are you okay? Will asked gently. I don't know, she admitted. Everything he said about the money is true. I don't have anything of my own. I've been living off my parents' goodwill and Theo's generosity for so long. I don't even know if I'm capable of supporting myself. You're stronger than you think, Will said. And you're not alone in this. Why? She asked, turning to face him. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Will considered the question, searching for words that would capture the complexity of his feelings. Because when Sarah was dying, she made me promise something. She said that if I ever got the chance to help someone find their way back to themselves, I should take it. She said, that's what love really is, helping people become who they're meant to be. Tears slipped down Tori's cheeks. She sounds like she was incredible. She was, and she would have liked you. That night, Will found Tori in the kitchen, staring out the window at the snow-covered backyard. She'd changed into one of Sarah's old sweaters again, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep, he asked. Too much thinking, she replied. I keep wondering what I'm going to do. I have a degree, work experience, but it's been over a year since I've used any of it, and starting over at 32 feels terrifying. You don't have to figure it all out tonight, Will said, moving to stand beside her. One day at a time. Is that how you got through losing Sarah? Some days.